Hi everyone, I'm Kate Kennedy and I'm here with day 55 of 100 Days of Kane, PA. And I know many of you know of Norman Rockwell, a very famous illustrator, but do you know the story of his brother Jarvis? Both brothers have a connection to Kane, and tonight Denny Driscoll is going to share the stories from the Kane Preservation Historical Society at the Depot about the Rockwell brothers. So I'm going to go ahead and flip you around. We're going to come right in here. Hello, Mr. Driscoll.
Good evening, Kate.
How are you today?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm really excited about tonight's topic, talking about Norman and Jarvis Rockwell. So could you start by talking about how did Jarvis Rockwell get to Kane?
Well, the interesting thing is that it's a decade that most people have forgotten about, the 1930s. And it just ended the great crash on Wall Street, and it was a time of the Depression. And it just happened that Jarvis Rockwell was a stockbroker on Wall Street. And so when the market crashed, he later wrote an article that said a lot of his friends jumped from windows. Instead, he jumped to Biddle Street in Kane. And basically how he got here was that we all have these great loves in life, things that we like to do from the time we're little. And it always, what I loved about teaching was I realized that adolescents really sort of fall in love with what they want to do the rest of their lives at that time. And Jarvis liked to build things out of wood, liked to build ships and so forth. So he really wasn't cut out to be a stockbroker. But when he was in New York at Christmas time, he would do what he loved. He would build doll houses and ships. But the doll houses, he would take to Macy's in New York. You've heard of the Miracle on 34th Street. Well, there it is. And you might have seen one of Jarvis's doll houses there. But J.E. Henrietta of the Holgate Company saw one of those doll houses too. And he always wanted Jarvis Rockwell to come to Kane and work for Holgate Toys. And when the Depression came, when the stock market fell, it was an opportunity for Jarvis to move on. And he did. He came to Kane in 1931 and started designing toys. One of the toys he designed were the Jerry blocks. And they had a unique way of spelling them, B-L-O-X. And they were different color blocks, but they were different shapes. And for the first time, children could arrange things in a creative way. There wasn't a pattern that they had to fit. So it was more of a learning experience than it was something just to amuse children.
I think it's so interesting to think about what a lifestyle change he made, going from being a stockbroker on Wall Street to moving to Kane to do this creative endeavor with Holgate. I can't imagine what a shift that was for him, and it sounds like something that he really would have enjoyed.
I think you're right. I don't know if he knew that he was going to spend a real lifetime here. Mm-hmm. But when he got here, I think he enjoyed just about every aspect of the community. But one thing that surprised him, I think, more than any other, was the climate. And in fact, probably after he experienced a number of white Christmases, he realized that this was one thing he couldn't guarantee at all. And so with the advent of winter, he started to see Kane in a different light. In fact, he realized this isn't the icebox of Pennsylvania. This is the winter wonderland of Pennsylvania. In fact, in 1932, there was a place called Lake Placid, New York, that hosted the Olympics. And in his dream, he thought, there's no reason why Kane, as a winter wonderland of Pennsylvania, couldn't host the Olympics as well. And so by about 1935, 36, a lot of people started listening to his dream of a winter wonderland and following the dreams that his toys were setting up for people as well.
That's so exciting. And so he was pretty involved in the community in addition to his job. What were some of the the ways that he invested in Kane? What were some of the community committees that he was part of?
Well, he actually became president of the country club, president of the tennis club, president of the ski club. I'm not sure how well he could ski at that time because New York City doesn't have a lot of snow. But I'm sure that it was fascinating to him just to be able to dream up these things. And so the Chamber of Commerce, it's something that you know a little bit about.
A little bit.
The Chamber of Commerce actually started a winter resort committee, and all sorts of great people were on it, including Jarvis Rockwell, including Dr. McCleary with the Wolves. So all of a sudden, we have a combination of these two characters coming together. And so it created a lot of excitement. In fact, Kaufman's department store in Pittsburgh sponsored a train, and that train, the first time it came off from Pittsburgh was on February the 2nd. It might have been Groundhog Day even. I don't know, I think the Groundhog was around then. We're going to have to come up with that. However, it came up from Pittsburgh, and they used to call it the Montpelier train. And the Montpelier, M-U-P-H-E-R-E, never heard of that before, but because they'd ask people, they'd say, well, welcome to Kane. Where are you from? And they said, well, Montpelier from Pittsburgh. And so that's how the Montpeliers got here. And in fact, one of the newspapers contended there were as many as 10,000 people here to enjoy the winter sports. We have a map that I can show you later that showed they had 12 miles of ski maps, they had hills, they had big gusty, little gusty, they had a 1.5 mile toboggan run. They had ice skating. They actually had hockey games, even though they had a hard time finding hockey players that time. There weren't too many Canadians here at that time to share their skill. But however, the winter sports became very big. So the neat thing is that Jarvis himself brought a whole new vision and a whole new excitement to the area that caught on during a decade that some people call the Great Depression. We could call it the great winter wonderland excitement.
Yeah, really taking an opportunity to have some bigger dreams.
Right.
So he moved here in 1931. How long was he in Kane?
He was in Kane until 1955.
So he spent a significant amount of time here and really gave back to the community too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Where was his office? Where was his workshop where he made these toys?
Well, unfortunately, it's gone, but we can still walk to that spot because if you go to the west parking lot of the country fair and stand there, if you walk toward the back of it and you look up, you might be looking at the second floor of that building because that's where his toy shop was or his workshop. In fact, we have a pretty nice photograph of it here.
So that's Jarvis in his workshop on Welsh Street, the corner of Welsh and
it's the corner of Welsh and Biddle Street.
Welsh and Biddle.
Mm-hmm. And there's one of the lacing beads. But what I love about this are many different things. One, that Jarvis is in it. Two is if you look over his left shoulder, you'll see a Santa Claus painting. That was the original painting that Norman, his brother Norman, did for the 1922 Saturday Evening Post Christmas cover.
That's the original copy of it.
That's the original, yes. And it just showed up about 8 years ago at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. at the American Painting Museum. Here, a gentleman by the name of George Lucas. And so it takes us right into Star Wars. Norman Rockwell, Star Wars. How can you beat that travel? And it's all because of Jarvis's change of mind. It's because of the opportunity that he saw to create children's toys, which there have been many. Norman influenced and is still influencing so many generations of Americans today. just with his covers. I have to tell you, every morning I like to drink out of his Saturday Evening Post Four Freedoms cups. And my favorite, I think, is the Thanksgiving cup. And so I don't skip it. I think I don't wash it every day, but I've been drinking out of it for the last 30 years, and it hasn't changed.
I think it's really fascinating that this really well-known original painting was here in Kane with Jarvis Rockwell.
Yeah, there were several, but the interesting thing is that as influential as Norman was with the covers of the Saturday Evening Post, Jarvis was really more influential with young people, with younger generations, than anyone ever knew. His toys have become a staple in the American society. The building blocks, everything has come from there. Another thing that's in that painting is a ship, which was one of his first loves, was building ships.
Oh, I see it up there, right? This ship?
Yep. When he was a very young person. And we can hop over to Norman's studio. And I had never seen one of Jarvis's ships complete until I walked into Norman's studio. That's in West Stockbridge, Massachusetts, in the Berkshire Mountains. And there's one of his, and it was right above. It was actually had the apex, the pinnacle of the gable area in the west wall or the east wall of the studio. This is the north wall. And they had one more ship that was on the south wall. It is on the wall to the right.
So it's pretty neat that Jarvis had one of Norman's original in his workshop, and it sounds like Norman had one of Jarvis's originals in his workshop.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, you go there, they're not even quite sure of that. But they do know that Jarvis did those. It would be nice. We're blessed with an original Norman Rockwell in Kane.
Oh. And
again, it's because of Jarvis Rockwell and the connection. Well, the interesting thing is that in 1935 and 36, things really got pretty exciting. They started to get snow trains coming up from Pittsburgh. They had a snow queen, and I'm sure Jarvis went to Norman and said, "Hey, will you be the judge for the Snow Queen?" And everybody thought, well, Norman would be a good person to judge that. So I think he even showed a little bit of Charles Dickens within his spirit, because for the first Snow Queen in 1938, he picked Lucille Frost.
Oh, how appropriate.
So just great for Snow Queen.
So Norman Rockwell came to Kane to judge the first Snow Queen?
I'm not sure that he did, but I believe he did. They might have judged from photographs, but I'm not.
So he had a part in it at least.
But he did have, and he had a part in the second one. He picked the 1939 Queen too. That was Jean McCluskey. But no Charles Dickens there. But we'll forgive him for that.
Well, and we have a family photo up here that I'd love for you to kind of talk about and go through so we know who is who.
This is a drawing that was done by Jarvis's youngest son, whose name was Richard. He later became a courtroom artist in New York, and so he also worked on cartoons. He did some things. Terry and the Pirates, I believe, was one of the things he worked on. But anyway, he did a number of things. There was his father with the Holgate toys around him. This was his Uncle Norman, and this was Norman's family. He had 3 children, his wife. In the painting in the middle, he has his father, whose father's name was Jarvis. So Jarvis was named after his father's mother. Here's Norman, and there's Jarvis as a young man. And even Norman is playing with some Holgate toys. The bingo bed is something I can remember playing with, so it's really ancient. And I'm sure most people can remember seeing those, and we have a number of those around too.
So this is interesting. So Jarvis's son made this painting, and in the original, like in the picture here, it's Norman and Jarvis with their parents. And then sitting in these chairs, we have Norman Rockwell,
this
or
is
Norman
Norman over here.
Rockwell, Jarvis Rockwell, their wives and kids. And it was one of Jarvis's sons that made this.
Correct.
And his name was Richard.
His name is Richard.
And then he has a brother named
John. John is the one who went to his uncle Norman and in 1936 and asked his uncle to donate something to inspire Kane students in art that they could give as a class gift.
Oh, so John graduated from John Rockwell.
John
Jarvis'
and
son,
Richard both graduated
from Kane High School.
Yeah, the same. I think that's the same school. You know about.
We all know the alma. I bet you they knew the alma mater back then too. So John asked for the senior class gift to be a Norman Rockwell painting.
Yeah, well, actually, it wasn't a painting. It was a charcoal sketch, and it was a drawing for it was a very large drawing because the Coca-Cola company commissioned it. And they wanted it to be almost 5 feet. And this is 51 inches. This is exactly the size of the original, but it's even more unique than we realized because we're investigating at the Norman Rockwell Museum in Stockbridge. The curator showed me that we found the piece in their definitive catalog. And I told her that I believe this to be a pattern, specifically a pounce pattern, one that's cut out. And she looked at me seriously and said, Norman never used those. Well, I was very happy to hear that because that meant she had never seen one. When we took this to be framed in Erie, took it up, unframed it, and the curator of the Erie Museum came in. You can't tell that it's a pattern until you have the glass off of it. And as soon as you take the glass off of it, then you can see a number of dark cuts. If you look at this, that was a photograph I took of it in the Erie Museum when we had it on the work table. I could get the light coming across, and if you see those real dark areas, those are razor cuts that he would pound charcoal through to transfer the drawing to a canvas. And it's not a new technique. Michelangelo used it on the Sistine Chapel. Many high Renaissance painters used that technique. Very, very time consuming. I actually did one to use as an example to show people what it was like. And I don't think I'll ever do another one because it's really labor intensive. But one thing I realized is that the only person that could have cut out that pattern was Norman Rockwell himself. Because nobody else would know exactly what lines to cut, how they want to cut them, because their whole oil painting depended on that. The interesting thing is, this is an oil painting that was done. This is actually on a plate now, but this is a copy of the painting. There's another copy of it over there. But the little girl, Coca-Cola rejected the painting after he did all this work for them. And he then stuck an apple in her hand.
Oh, instead of a Coca-Cola
That's
bottle.
right, which was much healthier. And I always thought this showed what a great visionary he was, because just about all your kids today have apples in their hands, except they're talking on them.
Well, this is so interesting, and I think it's great to know. So today, this original Norman Rockwell painting that was a 1936 class gift at the Kane High School is still in Kane.
Yeah. And it's what we did, we created a file for it. This is the first copy. This is the original frame that it was put in. Actually, it was lost when the high school was transitioned and the new high school was built. The original was lost. It was not under glass, and so we had it framed at that point and put under the glass. Found it in Erickson's school. That'll bring back some fond memories for everybody. But the most beautiful thing is that all these people have come at a time in the 1930s when there was really a great difficulty in the world. It brought the joy of dreams and the joy of these gifts that are having more and more impact with us every day. I look at this piece every day, and it can carry you back and recognizing how far something really good can travel, not only through space, but through time, maybe into eternity.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, this has been really interesting. I am very excited to learn the history of Jarvis Rockwell and Kane, and how his brother Norman even came here and left some things behind. So is there anything else that you wanted to share about these brothers before we wrap up today?
Even though, again, they're both gone, we can see that spiritually they've really never left us. And it's so wonderful to be able to walk into a historic site, a historic place, and touch the elements of not just the past, but more importantly, the future, the dreams, and seeing where people have carried the dreams and the visions and the great spiritual feelings they had when they came here to this pretty special spot on earth, as you know.
It's all tied together. It really is, past, present, and future. It all comes together. I love it. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. This was very informative, very interesting, and we really appreciate you taking the time to tell us this story.
Well, thank you, Kate, because without you, these things couldn't be shared. And that's the most important part. Find something good, but the most important part is finding a way of sharing it, and no telling where it'll stop.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. All right, everyone. I hope that you found this as interesting as I did. Before I came, before too long, I didn't realize that Norman Rockwell even had a brother, let alone the impact that he had here in Kane. So I hope you learned something new tonight. And, the depot here on the corner of Greaves and Fraley Street is open every Wednesday night and on the weekends, or you can call and make an appointment to come down. And if you've never been down here, you have to come down and see everything, because there's just so much rich history here in Kane. I think you're just going to continue to be inspired as you learn these stories. And what are the stories that you want to hear? We still have some Wednesdays left in this 100 Days series, so we're going to continue to tell these history stories of Kane, and would love to hear your ideas of what you would like to learn about in the upcoming Wednesdays on the 100 Days of Kane. So thank you guys all so much for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you again tomorrow for day 56.